Hello, everybody. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, about to be joined by Ken Wiebe from Sportsnet. Together, we are Kenny and Renny, and this is the Kenny and Renny post-game show on what has turned out to be the very last game for the Winnipeg Jets before the Christmas season. We found out about halfway through the game. We already knew going into this game that the Tuesday night game against the Nashville Predators was going to be postponed. Now, because of border issues that the NHL is seeing, they've stopped cross-border travel. And that means that the Wednesday game against the Dallas Stars is now going to be postponed. So that was your last game before the Christmas break. And boy, a necessary game to get some good feelings in the locker room, in my opinion, if you're the Winnipeg Jets. The last thing you needed to do was head into the Christmas break having lost, 4 straight games. So getting off the schneid, doing so against a division foe like the St. Louis Blues, absolutely necessary, and finding some things to be excited about going forward along the way. I think we'll get into that with our main man, Ken Wiebe, and why wait any longer? Might as well get him here to talk about it right off the bat. Here's your guy with the best entry music in the business. Here comes Kenny. Ken, my friend, it's great to see you. What'd you make of tonight's game?
Well, like you said off the top, Sean, that was a game the Jets absolutely needed to have. They had lost 3 in a row. They couldn't really afford to lose another, as you mentioned, going into the game. I mean, if they were 10 points back, the St. Louis Blues, that would have been an awfully steep hill to climb, if you will. Biggest thing to take out of this game, what have we been talking about? The need for Mark Scheifele to demonstrate and elevate his play in a two-way manner. I thought that line with Nikolai Ehlers and Paul Stastny were absolutely fabulous in this afternoon game. Plenty of shots on goal, plenty of opportunities. I mean, it looked for a while like Mark Scheifele looked like he was snake bitten, and it was you were wondering what he had to do to get one. And then next thing you know, he takes a Nikolai Ehlers shot off what appeared to be the top of his kneecap. And next shift, he goes out and snaps one home from the slot. So Scheifele was very good in this game. And here's the other part, Sean. We've been asking for a long time, when are Mark Scheifele and Pierre-Luc Dubois going to dominate in a game together? No points for Dubois, but 7 shots on goal and 10 shot attempts and 2 breakaways. I mean, that line was still pretty good tonight, but there was no question that the driving force for the Winnipeg Jets in this contest was the line of Ehlers with 4 points, Paul Stastny with 3, and Mark Scheifele with the pair. Yes, of course, the one play was Ehlers to Stastny on the power play, but that line at 5-on-5 was excellent.
I think this got me thinking, because I know that there's been talk, and maybe at the center of that talk is our main man Hustler on Winnipeg Sports Talk, the suggestion of potentially trading a guy like Mark Scheifele. Right from off the bat, when I heard that, I thought to myself, you do something like that at your own peril. I mean, you trade a player like Mark Scheifele, you better make sure you are getting exactly what you want in return. You don't make a trade like that lightly. I think the importance of a game like this is the more you can allow Mark Scheifele to have the success that he has with different players in this lineup, the more choices it gives you to create, and I'll go back to the point I've been making, to create depth in the lineup. And I say it like this, we started the season with a guy like Paul Stastny was on the 3rd line. If you're trying to take your most skilled guys and break it up so that you can have, and I do think this is the goal the Winnipeg Jets should be getting to, is getting to 3 legitimate lines, 3 legitimate scoring lines. A guy like Stastny needs to be used up the lineup the way that we're seeing this right now. And I take a look at what's happening with Mark Scheifele, and not only tonight did this line have 4 goals, like you said, Nick Ehlers has 4 points in that game. There were 2 goals or 2 potential goals earlier in the game that I thought Mark Scheifele had on his stick, that the puck bounced over his stick. He looked a little bit snake bitten the last couple of games here, and he kind of alluded to that in the post game press conference. But I mean, this is a game where they could have had 6 goals, that line, on this night. Maybe could have had 7 goals the way that they were going. And I love the way that I asked Dave Lowry what's working so well with this line. And sometimes in this business, Ken, when you can boil it down to really, really simple things, it works well. But he's like, you got hockey IQ in Stastny, you got skill in Mark Scheifele, and you got speed in Nick Ehlers. And those 3 ingredients have gone together to make one tasty dish for the Winnipeg Jets right now. That line looks phenomenal. I said it in the last show. I thought that line looked great. Nick Ehlers has now factored in on the Jets' last 6 goals on 7 of the Jets' last 8 goals. But this line is working. And we just talked about it in our post-game hit for Sportsnet. But this right now is the last kind of line blending of Paul Maurice before he walked out the door. This line was put together by Paul Maurice, and then he walked out the door, and we've seen this since. I think it is massively important for the player who's supposed to be your number 1 center, and I do still think the Winnipeg Jets think of Mark Scheifele as their number 1 center and Pierre-Luc Dubois as their 1B or second-line center, however you want to put it. But you want the idea that you can put your top line center with anyone up and down the lineup. And so the more times you can take him away from, like a lot of people will think, and I think there was a real belief, with Paul Maurice while he was here, if I want these guys to do well, I just got to put Wheeler and Kyle Connor with Mark Scheifele, and they're going to do fine. I like the idea that your 1A centerman can go with, okay, I can go with those 2 players, but you can put me with Paul Stastny and Nick Ehlers as well, and we're going to tear it up just as much. That way you start getting a guy feeling like no matter where he goes, he's bulletproof. And I think a Mark Scheifele who feels like he's bulletproof is exactly what the Winnipeg Jets are going to require, amongst a lot of other things, and we can talk about that. But needing to have Mark Scheifele feel like that is what it's going to take for this team to get back into the playoff hunt this season.
Well, the biggest thing that we heard from Dave Lowry, yes, he praised that line, but he praised them for their 2-way play. Obviously, they were dominant when it came to the offense generated, Sean, but you also saw the effort in both ends of the rink, which is important for that line, and that was something that we were all very curious to see what would happen with the coaching change. I know that Albin mentioning Scheifele being free. I don't agree with that take. I understand where you're coming from, but I mean, Paul Maurice was Mark Scheifele's biggest backer, and he played him accordingly. So I don't think there was any freeing for Mark Scheifele. Yes, there's still pressure on Mark Scheifele. He needs to produce and perform in order for the Jets to be a successful hockey team. And as some folks are saying, I mean, Pierre-Luc Dubois, their line played some hard minutes. But here's the thing. They need both of those lines going. And with the current composition, that can certainly help them. I mean, Paul Stastny's play has been exceptional. It's not just the young and fast guys. Paul Stastny's been excellent these last couple of games. And you know what Paul Stastny means to the Winnipeg Jets? All you need to look at was Nikolai Ehlers' reaction. He was far more excited for Paul Stastny than he was for scoring the goal himself. And the joke from Ehlers was that after the game, guys were beaking him and saying he almost got the puck before it actually crossed the line. So the goal line, I mean. So that was a kind of a funny moment there. And too, we've heard Paul Stastny talk about Nikolai Ehlers before. Today he went so far as saying, I want you to be the guy that scores on my 500th goal. I mean, you don't hear that from guys very often. That goes back to the the genuine support that one another give them. Yeah, I mean, Ehlers has been going really well. I think the last 2 games he's been excellent. I think Ehlers was kind of looking for the word, and for me, Paul Stastny is the connector. He's the guy that connects the line with his smarts and his ability to put people in excellent positions. So, and there too, Dave Lowry, when he was asked by Tim Campbell of NHL.com about the value of a guy like Stastny, there's a reason Paul Stastny was back. I mean, Dave Lowry extended his career to 1,084 games because he was a high character kind of guy, the way that Paul Stastny is. I mean, obviously, Stastny's more of a skilled player, but the value of having veterans who you can count on and you know exactly what you're going to get is immense, and we saw it on display here the last couple of games. But you're right, Mark Scheifele needs to elevate his game, and he has done that. I mean, I'm with you, Sean. I mean, Mark Scheifele could have 6 or 7 goals himself the last 2 games, given the quality of opportunity he has been generating. So for me, if he he gets one today, he starts feeling better about himself. Those guys could really even continue to elevate with their skill set. That's for sure. But
now,
this was.
Go. Sorry, do you think
It isn't just a one-line hockey team. I mean, people are talking about ice time. I mean, oh, well, Andrew Copp, well, he's not in the top 6. Well, Andrew Copp played almost 21 minutes again today. So, I mean, would Andrew Copp like to play with a little bit higher level of skill? Well, maybe. But he played a strong game, and he's playing hard, and he's still playing a lot. So he still plays an important role. This isn't a demotion for him. But one thing the Jets have lacked, Sean, as we switch lines, that third line has lacked an identity this year. That's no longer lacking when you have Andrew Copp and Adam Lowry together like they've been the last 2 games. They've taken on the hard matchups, and they've done a really nice job.
Okay, I'm going to lose this comment because I want to continue on the point you're making, but I want to get back to this. Minkus saying I have been waiting nearly 4 years for the Jets to put in an effort like the one delivered today. I seem to be at odds with Jets fans. I was in this building. I thought this game was a friggin' snoozer. I thought that there was like a lot of effort lacking on the part of the Blues. I did not see it. Like if that was a playoff level game, that's the worst playoff level game I've ever seen before. We'll get back to that because I seem to be on a different page than a lot of Jets fans here. I personally am of the opinion that Jets fans are seeing a win and they're celebrating the win and thinking that has to do with the effort. That game looked to me like 2 teams that, and I know that they didn't, but the league's heading in a direction, and I think people feel like things are shutting down. It felt like that. The effort was shutting down in that game for me. Not that there weren't good things happening, but let's get into that later, Ken, because I want to continue on this Andrew Copp trajectory that you were talking about. Just the idea that Copp, I find this interesting because I wonder if some of the coaching decisions that were made by Paul Maurice before this, and I've thought this for a long time, I think Paul Maurice actually will coach his team at times to try and make, or he tried to make his general manager's job easier. And what I mean by that is if a player's coming into a contract year or something like that, I thought Andrew Copp was handled in a way by his head coach as a guy who is being shown there's opportunity here in Winnipeg and there's a future for you, and this is what that future could look like. Andrew Copp was given a lot of opportunity here, and I wondered if maybe the third line lacking an identity, which Paul Maurice very much said that. He outright said that. He knew that. I think we both know the same as Paul Maurice feels like if I put Scheifele, Wheeler, and Connor on a line together that they're going to do well. I think Paul Maurice knew that if I put Andrew Copp back on the third line, that line's going to have an identity again. So to me, it's almost the idea of Paul Maurice was coaching this team and using his players in a way that Andrew Copp was going to walk away from this season feeling like I could be here in this town. I could stay longer. I could maybe take a little bit less money but I can be this kind of player with this kind of team. Whereas now, if he spends the rest of the year on the third line, knowing what we know about him wanting to play up the lineup, he's never been shy about saying that and wanting to kind of show off his skill. Is relegating Andrew Copp to a third line and an identity line, is that basically what's best for the team, but also what's likely going to see Andrew Copp for sure head out of town?
Well, I wouldn't say for one second that Andrew Copp is going to be on the third line. And just like I said, I mean, if you want an importance of opportunity, you're not going to go very many places and play 21 minutes or more than 21 minutes. He's still a valuable player on this team, even though he's being used right now in the last 2 games in more of a, checking line plus kind of role. And Sean, I know what you're saying about opportunity, but I mean, Andrew Copp earned the opportunity. He was a point-a-game player out of the gate for the Winnipeg Jets for the first 10 or 12 games. So it's not like he was playing out of position. The finish hasn't been there as much in the last stretch of games here. We know that that's what the facts will tell us, but it hasn't been for a lack of generation. So Stonewall Dave is
Stonewall Dave wants me to get out the pom-poms. Like, Stonewall Dave is just sick and tired of me, looking at the glass half empty or full. He wants me to grab the pom-poms and say that this was the best victory we've seen from the Winnipeg Jets in 4 years. Sorry, Stonewall Dave. I'm going to call it like I see it. But anyways, go on.
No, and I understand again where there's just so much, like 52 games left in the regular season schedule if they can get to 52 games. So, might Andrew Copp, being in the same headspace if he's on the third line versus the second? Well, again, that only Andrew Copp will tell us that. But I don't think that this means that his time, being with Lowry isn't going to be something that says this is a guarantee for Andrew Copp to be being shown the door or having him looking for greener pastures. But it'll be interesting to see how things evolve as this continues, and do they stick with that line? We saw Jansen Harkins hop onto that line late in the game, and I thought that was a smart move. I mean, Dominic Toninato was given a very big opportunity here, and in the last couple of games he's taken 3 minor penalties. So A, he's trying to establish himself on the penalty killing unit, and B, he's given a promotion into the checking line role in the third line, but it hasn't really been rolling for him. So I like the fact that Harkins got an extra bump late in the game. It gives that line, when we talk about checking line plus, Harkins has more offensive ability than Dominic Toninato. So I'm going to reinforce something that I said a couple games to you, Sean. I think that the Jets have to be actively looking at bringing back Mason Appleton. It has not been a great fit for him with the Seattle Kraken. I can't imagine the price tag would be an exceptionally high amount. And if the Jets can bring back Mason Appleton for a draft pick or a second-tier prospect, I absolutely think that Kevin Cheveldayoff would be looking into that. They can afford it even after Blake Wheeler comes back with, I think his contract is $900,000, somewhere around there. And then if you put Appleton, Copp, and Lowry together, now you have a line that can give you 3 guys in double digits in goal scoring and can check the other team's socks off. So that has to be something that would be under consideration for Kevin Cheveldayoff and the management team as well. But yeah, for sure, it's going to be interesting to see. But the other thing, Sean, too, how many teams is Andrew Copp going to where he's on the top power play unit and on the top penalty killing unit? Andrew Kopp's a good player, but a lot of the teams that are cap teams, those roles are taken by other people. The Jets do trust and value Andrew Copp. He knows that, but now it's about putting up some numbers and continuing to do the job that he does as a great two-way player.
Well, I think you just I think hammered home my point as good as I could have possibly hammered it home. How many other teams is Andrew Copp in that position on? Not a lot. And I do think I do believe this, Ken. I think you could probably. I think we've talked about this before. I think you may be in agreement in some situations that there's been times when Paul Maurice has coached to kind of create opportunities, and maybe like the idea of what you got to do to keep players around a city like Winnipeg. Everyone knows about this. I think there's enough guys who are engaged and invested in the city that they're going to stay regardless. But I do think, too, you have to kind of cajole situations and do things to keep certain players around. Andrew Copp is not going to be staying in Winnipeg if it is entirely based on where he gets the most money, because the Jets aren't going to be able to pay him more money than other teams that want him in this offseason. That's the fact of the matter. If he's going to stay in Winnipeg, he's going to stay in Winnipeg because there are other intangibles that he's interested in. Maybe he likes the city. Maybe he likes the players he's playing with. Maybe he likes the organization. Maybe he likes the opportunities that he's given here. Whatever that is, if it comes down to a purely financial decision, he's probably not going to be here. So my suggestion is just that being given those opportunities is exactly why a guy like Andrew Copp would want to stay around here. And I just wonder, and I'm not saying that it's going to end up being that, although maybe it will, especially, you're right, I think picking up Appleton would be phenomenal. I think if you go pick up Appleton, you reunite that third line, you recreate something I think that the Jets have been missing mightily this season. But if you go do that, then you're telling Andrew Copp that his future on this team is as a third line or on an identity line, and that's what you're selling him on. And so I wonder if Paul Maurice was trying to sell him on something else this season before he left. And to your point, Andrew Copp delivered when they gave him those opportunities. They gave him an opportunity, tried to sell him on that opportunity, and he delivered on that opportunity, which I think, one, opens up his mind to what he's capable of doing as a player, but two, opens up other teams' minds on what they think Andrew Copp his potential is and where he could fit in their organization.
Sure, just one thing on that. I mean, Andrew Copp played in the top 6 for a good chunk of last season, so this was not a new development just done in a contract year. So what I'm saying is, I just think that this is something that Andrew Copp has been building towards and earned. And again, like I said, I don't see this as being a demotion if he's playing on the third line. If your minutes are at 21 minutes, it's not a demotion, is my counter to him saying, I'm on the third line, I'm out of here. I don't think it's that simple.
Right. No, I know, but I mean, ice time playing a specific role versus being versus.
But you're still in the first power play, though.
Like Ken, how long was Andrew Copp the second highest scorer on this team for?
If
he stays on the third line, I don't care if he's playing 20 minutes on an identity line versus 20 minutes up where he's one of the team's best scorers. He's going into a contract here, Ken. You get paid for goals.
I understand that, but his goal production dipped when he was in the top 6. It didn't dip when he went to the third line. And he's still on the first power play, so it's not like you don't have a chance to play with highly skilled players. So you can still get your cookies on the power play.
I agree. I don't. At this point, I don't know what we're debating here. It's like I'm just saying, like, being put on the third line is not the same as being on a top scoring line. For a guy who's going into the offseason and trying to get paid, like there's an obvious clear difference between being on the third line with Adam Lowry and being up on the second or first line beside someone like Mark Scheifele or Nick Ehlers. It's an obvious distinction. I don't see how it can't be.
Well, no, I'm not arguing that. What I'm saying is that before Andrew Copp was on the second power play, now he's on the first power play. So you lose some of the even strength minutes, but you're still getting an opportunity to play with highly skilled players and produce.
All right. So, Sebastian Unruh is right here. I'm just going to move on from this.
Sir, how about this? Let's word that Perfetti. Let's just tackle this quickly. I mean, if there's an injury opportunity here. It looks like one quick thing. I think that Evgeny Svechnikov is probably going to be out for a couple of weeks. I think it's a left knee injury from that crazy collision, and in the neutral zone. I mean, would Perfetti? Do you think there would be an opportunity the Jets consider Perfetti after the World Juniors? Just quickly.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think he'd be here if it wasn't for that situation. I mean, CJ Cease came in and is as deserving as anyone for an opportunity, and it was great to see Reichel have his first game. But I think we know what the future is here in Winnipeg, and Cole Perfetti is a guy who started the season with the Winnipeg Jets. There's new management, not management, but there's a new coach up and running here. But at the beginning of the season, Paul Maurice had said the guys who made the team were going to be guys that were going to spend some time with the Jets throughout this season. Cole Perfetti was one of those guys. I think with the expectation of injuries, especially, skilled players, top end players like Blake Wheeler out of the lineup, you want to bring in guys who can potentially play that role. So yeah, I would fully expect Cole Perfetti to be in, for no doubt. That's a no doubter for me. Hey, let's dwell on Ehlers a little bit here. I want to dig down deeper into his game and get an idea of what you think is working so well for him. Like I'd said, Ehlers has been on the Jets' last 6 goals in 7 of their last 8 goals. The idea of this team trying to play with more speed, is Ehlers the perfect example of the guy who is on the front edge of that wave?
For sure. I mean, Kyle Connor and Ehlers for sure. In this situation, it's interesting, Sean. In the past, you haven't really, outside of a couple of games, and one of them was in Calgary, I think maybe it was even last season, where it was Ehlers, Scheifele, and Connor playing together, and they had 4 goals or whatever it was. But then the next night they gave up 3 or 4. So for me, I haven't really seen a ton of chemistry with those two. Even in the last time before he went back to Wheeler, Scheifele, and Connor, Ehlers and Scheifele were together, and it didn't seem to be clicking for either one of them. But what we've seen lately is both of them push the pace with one another. Ehlers is such a driver, and Mark Scheifele, when he's moving his feet, can be incredibly dangerous as well. And the thing to me, there have been times in the past where both of the guys want the puck in their hands, Sean, right? This is what we know. Ehlers is a zone entry machine. Mark Scheifele likes to have the puck in his hands and be the guy with the vision and being the key distributor on his line. So I wouldn't say that you needed more than one puck previously when you had those two guys going, but they weren't always sharing it in symmetry, I guess, if you will. To me, what we've seen in the last couple of games is that both of them are using their speed to back up their opponent and then just creating an enormous amount of grade A scoring chances for each one of them. And then you have the brains of Stastny, who's just putting the puck in the right place all the time. He gets Binnington with a sneak attack on one of them, which was obviously that was a softie that Binnington would like back. I mean, he pushed across fine, but he didn't seal his post off. But I think the big thing for me, and we've talked about this for a long time, I've wanted to see Nikolai Ehlers and Mark Scheifele together for a longer stretch of time because based on their skill sets, they should be able to help one another. But previously, it just wasn't happening. Whether that was, because Ehlers prefers to be on the right and so does Blake Wheeler, that's another story entirely. But what I've seen from those two guys is a willingness to share the puck and an ability to create incredible scoring chances for one another because of their speed and ability to push back opponents.
What I'm seeing from him, and this was an element. I'll tell you, one of the things that both Blake Wheeler and Mark Scheifele love about playing with Kyle Connor is when they're a possession, when they get in that offensive zone, they're a possession line, right? And they like to move, they like to set up their opportunities. And when they strike on that opportunities, it's kind of like a viper strike, right? Like they just slowly kind of lull you into a sense of security, almost like a hypnotism. Then suddenly it's a seam pass and boom, it's in the back of the net. Well, if it's not in the back of the net, if it's a save or if it misses the net, it's on those back boards. One of the things that Kyle Connor is absolutely elite at, one of the best in the league, is that puck retrieval. He's fast to get to where the puck is and scoop it back up and get it right back to those players. And what that allows those players to do is create the opportunity to try plays, shoot the puck towards the net without the fear that a shot is going to create a turnover, right? And I saw that from Nick Ehlers tonight. There was a number of times that Mark Scheifele tried to play, and the pass got broken up and was kind of in that no man's land. And out of nowhere, Nick Ehlers scooped in, picked up the puck, held on to that possession. And I think that you're talking about that speed. There's times I believe that Nick Ehlers' speed takes him away from his teammates, and then other times where he uses that and is able to kind of bring himself closer to his teammates. And maybe that's a little bit of a play or a different way to talk about how Paul Maurice used to talk about Nick Ehlers using his speed to keep him on the outside, and now or at the last season when he had a bit of a breakout year, was using it to kind of cut towards the middle. Nick Ehlers, to me, seems to be using his speed in a way that he's like entirely engaged, always aware of where the puck is, and always getting either to the puck when it needs getting to, or getting to that open space to give his teammates, an outlet when they do have possession of the puck. And the way that's working, especially with a player like Paul Stastny, who we heard from Nick Ehlers talking about him after the game, is just always being in the right spot. Scheifele talked about him as well. He's just always right where you need to be and always making the right play. Well, if you've got that element, that means that you've got one guy who's just always going to be exactly where you need him, another guy who's got the skill to try and set things up and try plays, and another guy who's able to go scoop and pick up that puck if you do lose it. It means a lot of possession, and it means a lot of confidence in your line mates. I just think those three, the last two games were phenomenal. I know it's a small sample size, but I'm loving what I'm seeing from that line. And for the first time, since I think the beginning of the year, when I saw Svechnikov and Pierre-Luc Dubois and Kyle Connor together, I'm really kind of fascinated by and excited for the Jets about the potential of a line and what they can do going forwards. I said this last game, I think it'll take a little bit of time for Pierre-Luc Dubois and Kyle Connor to start clicking the way they did at the beginning of the season. And I think that, as I said last show, I think one of the big reasons for that is I think Kyle Connor plays a different style when he's with Wheeler and Scheifele and got kind of invested in that style. I think it's going to take some time to get back back to the style that he had that worked with Pierre-Luc Dubois. But if that line, the Stastny, Ehlers, and Scheifele line, can continue doing what they're doing and be the top line on this team, which I think they've clearly been the last 2 games, and that line is to be able to get back to what they were doing before Pierre-Luc Dubois and Kyle Connor, you've got a phenomenal 1-2 punch right there. And like you said, if you've got a third line that is actually reclaiming its identity and able to go out, and someone said it in the chat room today, how much did we notice Ryan O'Reilly today? Well, you got to give a hand to Adam Lowry's line for playing that line the way that they did tonight. Then all of a sudden you've got the recipe that not only makes you a hard team to play against, but a team that is lethal and able to score and kind of pile things up on you, especially on home ice when you control the matchup.
Yeah, right on. I agree with all of those things, Sean. Let's dig into this. How about the team defense? I mean, I agree with you. I don't think the Blues were sharp, not as sharp as we're used to seeing them. And just I wanted to promote your theory. Ryan O'Reilly said in his post-game address, I saw some of the quotes coming out of the Blues room, O'Reilly pointing the finger directly at himself. He didn't think he was very good defensively. He said that flat out when asked about it. And they weren't as good as what we're used to seeing. As I reminded you, though, I mean, it's like the other night the Capitals were playing without a bunch of guys too. The Blues didn't have Robert Thomas. They didn't have a bunch of other guys in their lineup. Jordan Binnington hadn't played since, I think, late November. This was his first game in a while. He looked a little bit rusty. He got a little bit rattled again with the whole mask on and off thing. And I know some people had asked what happened in the arena that maybe some folks didn't see during the television broadcast was that after, yes, the strap came off the first time, but Binnington waited until it suited the Blues play and then pulled his mask off and was warned about it by the referee. So I think, yes, it's true that the strap did come loose again the second time, but Binnington actually looked at the referee, saw that the Blues had it, the Blues turned it over, the Jets got the puck back, and then he pulled his mask off again. It wasn't like he shook it off like we've seen it previously with Connor Hellebuck. That's why the penalty was called. And someone had also asked on Twitter if you could review a play like that. No, you cannot. So anyways, quickly, let's go. What did you think of the Jets team defense, especially, playing without Nate Schmidt? It was a chance for the Jets to see Dylan DeMello and Josh Morrissey again, something we haven't really seen since the first shift of the series against the Montreal Canadiens, where DeMello had that groin injury on the very first shift just 30 seconds in.
Well, I'll say this, Ken, and we talked about this before we got here. The 2 Blues goals I thought was egregious defensive play by the Winnipeg Jets. I thought they were bantam-level goals on both instances. One of them, a 2-on-3 for the Blues. 2 Blues players, 3 Jets players. It's basically a Blues player beating the Jets defenders to a spot that allows him to throw the pass cross ice. And in both goals, it is a Jets defender right in front of the net, right in a spot to either take the defender's stick or take the puck. In one instance, on the second goal, Neil Pionk took neither, and it's a tap-in goal. And in the one before that, I just feel like I know that I think you and I differ on this one a little bit. On the first goal, Morrissey, I think you think he's in the right position. I think there's just no reason for him to take the puck rather than the man in that situation. I think he lets the guy beat him to the back post and chooses, rather than beating him to the back post and just muscling him out of that area, he chooses to try and stop the pass on the way through. It's an all or nothing play and ends up in the back of the net. So I thought those two were really bad examples of defense. And then I'll coach the rest of it, and I'll go back to this. And it's funny because I noticed this earlier on. Half the chat room or some of the chat room is very much agreeing with me that this wasn't the best example of effort from both teams here tonight. And some are vehemently disagreeing with me, thinking that this was maybe the best example of hockey we've seen from the Winnipeg Jets and the St. Louis Blues since they played in the first round of the playoffs back in 2019. I thought, you brought up Ryan O'Reilly. I'm not surprised Ryan O'Reilly is saying that. There was a play earlier in that game where it ended up being a 2-on-1 for the Jets. They didn't score on it. But Ryan O'Reilly was there were a Blues first defender back and a Jets player, and Ryan O'Reilly was the next player, and he just absolutely stopped skating, and then suddenly noticed the second Jets player skate past him and head in there. That is not what we've come to expect from one of the best defenders in the game. That was, an effort lapse. It was a mental lapse. It was, and I saw that time and time again on the ice, bouncing pucks. How many pucks were wide open passes from Blues players that ended up in the Blues players' feet? This was not, to me, an example of the best that the St. Louis Blues had to offer. And you know what, Ken? I took heat for this when I said that a little while back, that game that the Jets beat the Oilers 5-1. Everyone said that it was excuses and that I was raining on the parade, but I think all of us can look back on that game and realize that the Oilers, who'd played 4 games in 7 days and traveled 4 different days on that wasn't their best example. It's okay to point this kind of stuff out. It's okay to point that the St. Louis Blues weren't at the top of their game tonight. Just as the same as it's okay to point out the fact that I don't care if they weren't at the top of their game. What I'm seeing from the Winnipeg Jets top line and Mark Scheifele, Nick Ehlers, and Paul Stastny is something to be excited about. You should get excited about what you saw. It doesn't matter if the Blues had their best effort tonight. I saw enough from that line to think that line is onto something special, and it's going to be great like that. I will say this, Ken, I don't know that I saw enough of a push from the Blues to kind of understand how badly they pushed, or how hard they pushed the Winnipeg Jets defense. So I don't know that I can draw too much of a conclusion from it. They handled what they needed to handle tonight is the answer to that question. I just don't think that there was a lot for them to handle tonight. But, time and time again, and you've said this, you can only play the game that's in front of you. The Jets played the game that was in front of them, and it was enough. It was enough on this night.
I just meant my point being they only gave up really 28 shots on goal. And I mean, yeah, I agree with you completely on the Pionk play. I think that Pionk just had a brain cramp on that play. I don't, like you said, he took neither the man or the puck, and it was just an easy tap in. It wasn't even really, I think the indecision from Pionk was he wasn't sure if Andrew Copp was going to, it was sort of a 2-on-1+1 is what I would call it. Copp was back checking. He kind of had his arms on Buchnevich. And even there, Pionk almost felt like it seemed like Pionk wanted to go at Buchnevich, and then he realized it was too late for that. But then by the time he realized there was a player behind him, he didn't get a stick or body in the passing lane, and he didn't really go at the player. So to me, the goal by Nico Mikkola was far more egregious to me than the play that Morrissey. My point to you is that it's a 2-on-1 or it's a 2-on-2 play. The Jets have a trailer. That makes it a 2-on-3. Tarasenko drops the puck to Barbashev. When that happens, the sort out issue is that neither one of the Jets forwards really took Barbashev, which gave him the passing lane to get the pass across. And for me, Morrissey makes the right play to stay with Tarasenko. He did the right thing, but to me, I think where it got the issue for Morrissey was his skates were not pointed north. If his skates are pointed north and he knows that Tarasenko is at the back post, then I think the puck hits him and doesn't come through. Instead, he kind of was still looking at where the puck carrier was. His skates were kind of towards the sideboards, I think, and then he tried to basically bat the puck out of the air. I think I understand where you're coming from too, Sean. I think you want to see Morrissey go straight to Tarasenko, right? So that he's not able.
I want to see him eliminate the stick. That's what I want to see there.
So, I mean, I understand that. I just don't think that. I think he played everything about the play properly until that point. And then, like you said, it's a 50-50 shot to bat the puck out of the air. But the point, if you're Josh Morrissey and you know there's 2 forwards there, I'm guessing that Morrissey thinks one of those guys is going to seal the player off so that the passing lane is not even available to him. So again, I'm not taking him off the hook. I think that Josh would say, in a perfect world, he'll look at the video and say, I either have to take the guy's stick or have my feet or my skates pointed up ice so that maybe the puck hits me and doesn't get through. But I think in terms of how he played it was proper, which was unlike what Pionk did, where he checked he took neither the man or the puck on what was a clear 2-on-2 with a power play. I mean, that goal was something that can't happen. But I mean, outside of those 2 plays, I thought the Jets were pretty tidy overall. But I mean, of course, not everything is lock it down hockey. But for the most part, I thought the Jets defense core played pretty steadily, and I thought their puck movement and zone exits were pretty clean, which is something they've really struggled with during this 3-game losing streak. So to me, I thought that the fact that DeMello and Morrissey got back together, that probably there was a settling down element to that in some regards.
Well, I'll tell you this. I think you're touching on it. DeMello, to me, is an extremely calming presence, no matter who he plays with. He's another one of these guys, I think, that is like, you could kind of give him the same idea of what Paul Stastny does, just always seems to kind of make the right play and do so calmly. Doesn't really stand out because Nick Ehlers talked about that, about Paul Stastny. He doesn't stand out because he makes the right play look easy, and it's never fancy, and he's never like jiving you and doing a backhand pass or anything like that. So it doesn't stand out. He's just doing the right play all the time. I think DeMello is a similar player in that respect, and so adding him with this has taken me in the way back machine to the beginning of the Kenny and Renny shows, where we just were asking time and time and time again to have DeMello and Morrissey put together. It was something that we had wanted to see all last season. We never really had the opportunity to see it. So yeah, I like that, and it actually does have me thinking about what kind of, we talked about this, and I said that you've talked about the need to maybe switch up the defensive pairings, especially during this last skid, and kind of see what else you can find in there. And I'd said I don't think there's a lot of places they can go with this defense, but putting DeMello in that spot, kind of moving Schmidt around to see what else can be started up, I think is an interesting idea, because I've got a ton of faith in DeMello in that regard. I thought, other than that play, and to go back to that play, I think you're right. I think you did a good job of explaining why Josh Morrissey took the tack that he did. Again, it's a 2-on-3, and there's 2 forwards on the 1 forward carrying the puck. So I don't think Josh Morrissey expects that puck to come across, because there's 2 Jets forwards who should be sealing off any potential for that pass. So he does kind of get caught in no man's land. Other than that play, I did think that Josh Morrissey played a really good game. I thought last game that they played against the Washington Capitals, I thought Josh Morrissey was the Jets' second best player outside of Nick Ehlers. And so tonight I thought he had another solid game. So, now that you talk about it, you've got me coming around. I like the Jets' defensive effort, especially with those 2 players, a lot more on this night. Again, I just think it was hard to gauge. There was a lot less. Put it this way. We know that was not the same. If this is a grind down to the end of the playoffs and someone needs a win, this is not what the St. Louis Blues look like. And maybe that was the point. I put out a tweet early on that had something to do with this. The first period especially, I thought, was just kind of a no-show for both teams. If you're the St. Louis Blues and you're going into this game and you end up losing this game tonight, it's like, okay, well, we lost. We didn't have it on this night. Whatever. That just was not an option for the Winnipeg Jets tonight. The Winnipeg Jets needed to find a way. They could not be leaving a game on the table that was up for grabs, and they went out and they got the game that was up for grabs. So give them credit for that. The Jets needed this one tonight. They needed it far more than the St. Louis Blues. Their effort suggested that they wanted it far more than the St. Louis Blues, and they walk away with a win. That's what they need.
Well, and this is what we talked about in the 2 days, after the game Friday, Brendan Dillon, and then yesterday, Paul Stastny. The words we heard, Sean, were urgency, right? The Jets needed urgency, right? That's the thing. Did they need it more than the Blues? Of course. St. Louis has been winning with the lineup that they rolled out today, right? So, yeah. This is a team that we talked about it on our hit yesterday. The Blues were blowing the Jets. They're leaving them in their dust. Yeah. But by winning today, they were able to stay within striking distance. So just to be clear, I think it was important for DeMello to step up in that role because Schmidt was out. I'm not out here advocating saying for sure that pairing should be broken up, because I'm with you. I think that was the best pairing for the Jets on Friday night. So what I've been saying, though, I'd like to see a little bit of Nate Schmidt and Brendan Dillon in more of that historical shutdown role, and then sort of see what happens. And I'd be curious. I'm not calling for a demotion for Neil Pionk, but we've talked a lot about bigger, smaller. I have some curiosity to see what a pairing of Neil Pionk and Nolan Stanley might look like at some point down the road. I don't know. It just the things are rolling around up here, but I also want to see. I want to see
your
Morrissey
idea
and
of
Pionk
Schmidt,
too.
and I love your idea of Schmidt and Dillon. I love that idea, to be honest with you. I'm not so sure about the Pionk and Stanley, but
So no,
I
but
cut you off.
yeah, but I mean, I would like to see, first and foremost, I'm going to be honest. I think that DeMello played great. I personally thought going into the game that we might see Morrissey and Pionk, which is something I've sort of dropped on you before, and that we might have seen DeMello and Dillon just because of the familiarity factor from their San Jose days. But I mean, the pairings were steady today. I mean, it was one of those things. I agree. It was, it's interesting, Sean. It had some elements of a snoozer in it, but at the same time, Logan Brown smashed Nikolai Ehlers' head into the glass, and there was also a fight in the first period. So it wasn't really there. If those things happen in the same game, it's not really a snoozer in a lot of ways, right? I mean, but it just didn't. The game didn't go off the rails after those things happened.
It's funny though. Like Robert Sutton here says, the Blues and Jets hate each other, and I was thinking, wow, we didn't see that tonight. But then I started thinking of the fight. But one thing that struck me as so odd, Ken, is someone took a picture. I saw a picture of that fight and the way that the Jets and Blues players kind of lined up to watch the fight. Like, the fight to me came out of nowhere. I think everyone in the building was surprised by the fight, including the players. Like, the players who were on the ice were kind of looking like, what happened here? And it didn't seem like one of these things where the two teams were like hating each other. These two players came out and were like the personification of that happening. It just kind of seemed like there was this fight that was, we talk about like sideshow fights. That seemed like one of them. I wanted to ask you this before we get to, okay, do
one other quick one. Sorry. Also, too, Alexei Toropchenko was also a guy that was kind of running around, and he had a couple of near misses in the game. I think if he there was one on CJ Cease, and then he took another run at somebody else. I think if those hits are connected on, I think this game had the ability to go into that hate meter. But I agree, there wasn't the same. I mean, because we've been blessed with the series that went 6 games and was a slugfest, I think it's hard to have a regular season game reach that level of intensity or anger or hatred. But I mean, agree. I mean, let's look at the hits here. 27-29, and even then, it didn't feel like there were nearly 60 hits in the game today. So it was a different kind of game. I'm with you, but there were also still some moments where it had the ability to potentially go off the rails, but just simply it didn't. And maybe that had the fact, Lowry left the game there briefly. I mean, DeMello down the tunnel, Ehlers into concussion spotter issues. I mean, maybe the Jets just couldn't afford to really get scrapping. And again, they're never going to be in a team that has 5 fights in a game anyway.
No. Hey, what did you think of that before we move on? What did you think of the Ehlers hit?
I didn't like the hit. It was on the numbers, but it wasn't as blatantly on the numbers. And Nick Ehlers was the first one to say it. I think this was a situation.
Said he thought it was a good hit.
No, I didn't think he didn't say it. He said it wasn't a terrible hit. He definitely hit him on the numbers, but it was more from the side. But the force kind of pushed his head into the boards. I still think it was from behind. It has to be called boarding. But at the first look, I thought it could have been a major for boarding. But at a second look, I definitely think it was a minor penalty, and that's it. And this kind of goes back to what we've talked about a lot. In some ways, Ehlers put himself in a bad position. It was one of those where Ehlers kind of looked over his shoulder and knew he was going to get hit. So I don't think it was as egregious as some of the hits from behind we've seen. It's definitely a penalty, and it was unfortunate for Ehlers that his head hit the glass, and he's super lucky that he didn't get a concussion, because Logan Brown is a 6'6" guy who hit him kind of at full speed on the numbers, and his head hit the glass. So a lot of guys could have easily got a concussion on that.
Honestly, I didn't think it was a bad hit. I didn't think it was right on the numbers. I thought it was kind of from the side, and I thought Nick Ehlers agreed with that assessment. When it happened, I was sitting beside Munsey, Brian Munz and Jim Toth, and I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I think there was a little bit of surprise on our end that it was a penalty. It looked to me like that hit, and the result of that hit had more to do with like the size of one player and the size of other player, like you're saying. Like it looked bad in him hitting his head, but I think comes from what you're talking about, a 6'6" large player against a smaller player. I'd say this: if this was 2006, and I know it's not, but that may have been the lightest hit in a game in 2006. Like, we've gone to a point where the lightest hit of the game in a 2006 game is considered a penalty in today's NHL. The other thing I'd be interested in talking about, I noticed this last night. I don't know if you saw this tweet, but there was a hit in last night's game. It wasn't the really big one. It wasn't Kiro.
It was in the Oilers game along the boards.
Yes, and so did you see Shane Knighty weighed in on it and said, what about the player responsibility protecting themselves? I do wonder if there has to be some kind of conversation with players about, like, we either have to get to the point where if a player turns, that you just do not come anywhere near the guy. Like, Ehlers in that situation turns towards the boards and you just do not go anywhere near that guy, and that's the rule, and just stay away from the guy. Or there has to be a conversation with players about turning, because it's evident at this stage in the NHL that players are using the turn as a defense mechanism or a way to defend and not get the puck with the expectation that they will not be hit. And we're seeing too many of those hits follow through. To me, I come from the era and you come from the era where, like, hits from behind were persona non grata. You did not do it because it was far too dangerous. But the one thing you also did not do, Ken, in that days is if you saw a guy coming, the last thing you would ever do is turn your back to the player as they were coming into you with speed. We're seeing that happen far too much in the game right now. I do think it's something that needs to be addressed between the players union and the league on how they want to handle this, because at this stage right now it seems like there's a gray area that people are getting hurt, and we got to get away from that.
I didn't think that Ehlers really turned to put himself in a bad position.
Sorry, I'm not saying that Ehlers did. I just think that Ehlers' hit was a normal hit. I'm talking more about last night and that Shane Knighty tweet. I'm not saying Ehlers tried to sucker the guy. I actually think Ehlers was just straight up playing the puck. I'm just saying we're starting to see stuff like this happen more, and it feels like we're seeing it happen more and more often. I may not be right with that, but when you see a guy, and Shane had pointed it out, and I didn't see it until I saw Shane's tweet, and I noticed what he'd said, and I saw that the player saw the guy coming and fully turned his back to him.
Right, that was way different.
I'm not saying he deserved to get hit. I'm not saying that at all, but we got to get to a place where it's like, if you see the numbers, there is, like, refs need to, even if it's not a catastrophic hit, even if it's barely anything, even if the guy doesn't fall to the ground, the NHL needs to decide if they don't want that for hitting from behind, they just take a situation like that and call it no matter what, if there's any kind of contact. Or they start saying to players, you can't be using this as a defense mechanism where you see a guy coming and you think, I'm going to turn around and show him my numbers, and he's got to slam on the brakes and take himself out of the play, and then I get a free pass to get out of it. It's to me, it's a gray area that's causing problems right now. Let's get into this next little while here. So that Wednesday game gets postponed. Tuesday game is postponed. The Jets, we find out halfway through the game, have played their last game before the Christmas break. So not only did the Jets get to go into the Christmas break with a good feeling, ending on a winning note after, struggling for a little bit here, but they've got some time with a new coach. What can be accomplished in the next 3 to 4 days? Ken, probably 3 days, I'm thinking here. What can the Jets accomplish, and what can Dave Lowry get set up that he may not have been able to have they been playing games on Tuesday and Wednesday?
Yeah, I mean, provided there's no actual pause to the NHL season and the Jets can practice at least 2 times and maybe 3, it is like a little mini training camp. I mean, we know that you asked Dave Lowry about this, and he said you can't enact everything overnight. So if you want to look at some structural changes or some systems type things, it's a perfect time to do it, right? I mean, it's a great time to work on systems. That's exactly right, Brent. And the other part is special teams play. I mean, this is still a team that needs to get some special teams going. Their penalty kill has been a lot better the last little while. There's no doubt about that. And they gave up a bad penalty or a shorthanded goal today, but their power play struck again, and it was that second unit, the Ehlers unit, that got it going. So I think special teams play is something that they can work on. It's a chance to get some cohesion. I think that's a word that I think we've liked to use. We've seen, Paul Maurice, the idea was to get some balance. So now he's got 3 lines that conceivably can score. So I think you're going to see those guys kind of get a little bit more comfortable with one another. We'll see about David Gustafsson. Can he get back on the ice? I mean, is Dave Lowry's day-to-day the same as Paul Maurice's day-to-day? I mean, we're about to find out. I mean, like, he went crashing into the net. I mean, we're not sure. I want to say one thing quickly about Christian Reichel. Here's a guy that is, we talked about found money with Svechnikov. Christian Reichel is an undrafted player who the Manitoba Moose signed. I think the Jets had him at one of those Young Stars tournaments. He had a chance to sign. He started with the Moose. Pascal Vincent absolutely loved coaching Christian Reichel. I want to say it was 2 years ago already when I was doing just a quick update with Pascal, and he's like, don't forget about Christian Reichel. He wasn't even signed by the Jets at this time. He's like, don't bet against Christian Reichel to make it to the NHL. Again, he's another one of those guys who's a really smart guy. He's worked incredibly hard on getting his skating going a little bit more, and he can contribute in a lot of areas. In the minors, he plays on the power play, on the penalty kill. He plays a regular shift. He has a good defensive tilt to his game, but he's got soft hands. I know those guys didn't play a lot, only 4 minutes and change for each of them. But here's the thing, Sean. You didn't notice those guys in a bad way. They didn't make any stupid plays or a rookie play. You didn't make any plays that ended up in the back of the net or led directly to scoring chances. That's all a team can ask for, is if you plug in a guy on a Sunday afternoon when you haven't had one single practice with the NHL team. I mean, CJ Cease hasn't played a game since a game in San Jose a couple years ago. Christian Reichel's never played an NHL game. He didn't look like a guy who hadn't played an NHL game today, at least not to me. That's not to say he went out and lit it up out there, but I thought they made a couple of really smart plays out there. They're competitive guys, they're responsible defensively, and there's a little bit of offense in their game. I thought that both those guys stepped in and did a really nice job in limited minutes, obviously, but it was an important thing for the Jets, who we've talked about a lot. They haven't been getting a lot from their fourth line, so the fact that they could plug some guys in, and the other part too, I mean, part of the reason their ice time was down was because of that steady stream down the tunnel like I talked about.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this. I thought you talked about not noticing Reichel for the wrong reasons. I felt like I noticed him for the right reasons. I thought that he had like a lot of energy, a lot of vigor. I liked his posture. I liked his positioning on the ice. Yeah, it's kind of hard to get things going with 4 minutes. I think if I remember correctly, the 4 minutes they had, most of it came earlier in the game. So I think one of the things that you're thinking as a player is you get out, okay, I got that first shift behind me, got my legs underneath me, you go out the next shift, you build on that next shift, and you're thinking, okay, things are starting to go my way, and then the coach stops coming to you. And I don't think it had, clearly, and Dave Lowry said after the game, it had nothing to do with their play. The game dictated that they needed to get Dubois and Scheifele's line out more often, and that's fine, and that's the role that those guys are playing. But that doesn't mean that you don't get up there and start feeling like you are getting in a game and you're starting to get into a rhythm, and let's see if we can do something with that rhythm. But what I do think is, from what I was seeing from Christian Reichel, was I was expecting that if he got a little bit more and more time, it would go from him doing the right plays in the neutral zone, being in the right spot, getting the puck down, to him being like, okay, maybe I can branch out a little bit and push it down ice a little bit more, and then maybe see him go down and be part of a near chance or something like that. Yeah. And if you're that player who's getting called up and you're getting a near chance, that's enough sometimes, right? You don't need to get an assist or a goal in your first game. Sometimes just the fact that you are creating at the NHL level is enough. I felt like he was on the path to creating something in that game. If I'm the head coach, I take a look, and I think that was a real victory. I think you'd say to the kid after the game, whether you call him in your office or not, like, hey, I know it was only 4 minutes. Don't think that it was 4 minutes because we didn't like what we saw and stopped coming to you. We liked what you saw. The situation demanded otherwise. This is the boat that you're in, but we like the way you paddled tonight, kid. So I thought he did a really good job in that vein.
I'd give him another look. Yeah, I mean, even if Nate Schmidt is back or whatever else, I mean, I don't think he necessarily. I mean, again, we'll see what happens when the next game is played. But I'd like to see him with Gustafsson in a game. I mean, those are guys who are both sort of utility players with the Manitoba Moose, where you can use them in all situations. But I think whether it's right now or later on, Christian Reichel is going to be up again at another point, getting another chance. I mean, Gustafsson couldn't play today. It's nothing to do with Cease or Gustafsson. Yeah. Gustafsson was hurt, James.
Yeah. Let's handle this last one here, because I'm seeing a lot of this. Jeff Bowe says Lowry is putting players in a position to be successful. Definition of a good coach. Are you seeing a massive, because people in our chat room are, I'm just going to say right off the bat, I'm not. Are you seeing a massive difference in the way that Lowry is running his bench compared to what we saw from Murray's?
Well, the biggest difference is the third line being the identity line. But I mean, Paul was the guy who put these lines together. Paul put these lines together.
Exactly. That's the one thing that I think is important to like point out here. What the Dave Lowry is running with here is what Paul Maurice put together and then walked out of the door on. This wasn't a creation of Dave Lowry's. This was go on.
But there's no guarantee. Paul Maurice had not played that third line 20 minutes a game at any point this year. Now, part of the responsibility was that he didn't have Andrew Copp on that line to play them that many minutes, and those minutes are still going to be a little bit skewed because of the special teams minutes that both Lowry and Copp play as both power play and penalty kill individuals. But I would say the fact that they're going to the hard match a little bit more with the third line would be one difference. But that was a personnel decision. That isn't necessarily a coaching decision.
My counter to that is that line that was again founded by Paul Maurice years ago has been used like that in that manner by Maurice in the past, right?
Like, of course, yes. But this season, the difference is
this season, right? But put it this way: if Paul Maurice was putting that line back together with the intention of having them take on the other team's best, history dictates to us that this is how he would have used them. I mean, there's plenty of nights where the Lowry line was the second most utilized line by Paul Maurice when he used to use that line in that vein. So what we saw here tonight was before Paul Maurice walked out the door, he put the Connor Svechnikov Dubois line back together. He put this Stastny, Ehlers, Scheifele line that is having so much success together, and he put back together a line that he had used to great effect for a number of years and had used exactly how it was used here tonight. So I do take exception with anyone here who is suggesting that what Dave Lowry is doing here is new ground. What Dave Lowry is doing, I think, is a continuation of what Paul Maurice put in place before he left and went back to an old trusted style of play with the third line that Paul Maurice had basically made a signature of this Jets team for the 3 years prior to this.
I mean, the one difference, though, and what we've been all monitoring very closely is what's the disparity in minutes between Scheifele and Pierre-Luc Dubois. I mean, I think the thing that has changed, and this was the most dramatic effect, the biggest difference was in Paul Maurice's last game, where Mark Scheifele had 6 more minutes than Pierre-Luc Dubois. And yes, 45 or 50 seconds was on a late penalty kill when the Jets were down by 1. But even if you take that out, I mean, in that game, Pierre-Luc Dubois was the superior player, but he played 5 fewer minutes. Now, in the 2 games under Dave Lowry, the disparity in ice time was only around 2 minutes or 2:10. So that is the only really noticeable difference, but it's a small sample size. And I mean, is there going to be a night where Pierre-Luc Dubois plays 21 minutes and Mark Scheifele plays 18? Now, that would represent a major difference from Dave Lowry and Paul Maurice. But right now, and the other thing too, you don't want to come in and make massive changes, but the big thing that everyone was looking for, especially in the Jets locker room, will the hierarchy that was previously established under Paul Maurice be something where there's a continuation? And I would say so far that has not been the case. And yes, Mark Scheifele has still been high on the ice time chart, but today there's not one person in this building that could have said Mark Scheifele didn't deserve the ice time. And on Friday, even though Scheifele wasn't as good on Friday as he was today, Nikolai Ehlers was the best player on the ice, so that line was going to be tossed over the bench more. And again, I said earlier, Dubois had 10 shot attempts and 7 shots today, so that line was still pretty good, but the Scheifele line was better. So you can't make the argument that Dave Lowry didn't play Dubois as much as he should have tonight, because Scheifele's line was the best line. So, but I think that to have that, going back to your original point earlier on in the show, the Jets are a better team when both Scheifele and Dubois' lines are going at the same time. Whether that's 19 minutes, 20 minutes apiece, or a 2-minute disparity, that'll depend on who's going on each certain night. So for
as
me,
it should, exactly, Ken. And I think that's what a lot of people have been calling for. And again, we touched on this in the last show, when we focused quite a bit on Paul Maurice. Like, I do think, when it's all said and done, Paul Maurice didn't feel like he was the guy for this job anymore, so he steps aside. That means he didn't get to where he wanted to go, and you have to start addressing what didn't work. And I had said, I think in the end, the thing that cost Paul Maurice's tenure for the Winnipeg Jets the most is exactly what you're saying. There wasn't a system under which the players who were going were rewarded. The same players over and over again, regardless of performance, were rewarded, and some players just never got rewarded for their performance. So I think you're entirely right. And I think maybe to your point of what you're saying about the balance on ice time is that's what we're seeing. If Pierre-Luc Dubois feels that he is getting the amount of ice time that he deserves, then that's good, right? And it's not necessarily all about the player. The coach has to be the guy who calls this in the end, but the coach that has the majority of players feeling like they are getting rewarded for what they are doing out there, I think is a coach that is going to be successful. So to your point, I would say that what Dave Lowry has done in these first two games has created that environment to a degree. This was the last thing I was going to say on that point, though, because I don't necessarily want to take the last two games and say the balance between Pierre-Luc Dubois and Scheifele has been corrected and it was never done under Paul Maurice. I would go back to that short little time where Blake Wheeler was moved up onto that top line with Pierre-Luc Dubois, and Mark Scheifele was playing on the second line. When he took those two players off with Lowry and moved one onto each of those two lines, I don't remember what the balance was between those two lines, but I do think that it was pretty balanced, was it not?
I mean, it was fine. It was. I'm not here saying it was a 6-minute disparity every night, but there were a lot of nights where Pierre-Luc Dubois has outplayed Mark Scheifele to this point of the season. What my point is that ice time has not been reflected accordingly. What I would also say, Dave Lowry's done a nice job of running the bench for the first two games as head coach of the Winnipeg Jets, especially given the circumstances he took over the job.
The Pomo Show. People are asking us to shut down Kenny and Renny and put on the Pomo Show, or at least make it the Kenny and Pomo Show. One of those two. Anyways, we should shut it down here. So because things are getting shut down, we will not be on air on Tuesday or Wednesday, but we will be on Thursday. We're going to do our long-form Kenny and Renny show, one last one before Christmas. And we are going to have Kevin Bieksa on the show. This is a fish that we've been chasing for a long time. I can tell you, Ken, I was out in the playoffs last year, out for supper with Kevin and the Hockey Night crew, a bunch of the guys there. And I was sitting with Ron and Cassie and Elliot and David Amber, a whole big crew of people, and people are going to accuse me of name dropping here, and so be it. But it was the one thing that I did say, I bring it up for a specific point, is that we have had every last one of those people on the show except for Kevin Bieksa, and I kind of busted him, gave him a bit of a hard time at the table there, saying, everyone here at this table has been on the Kenny and Renny show except for you, and you're the one guy with strong ties to the market from being with the Moose. Like, how come you think you're too important for the Kenny and Renny show? And I guess he did think he was too important for the Kenny and Renny show until now. So yeah, hockey is shutting down, but we want to make sure we're creating great content for you to tune into, and it should be a real good one on Thursday. So if you can find the time, 3:00, come check us out, the Kenny and Renny long form show. It's going to be a doozy. Other than that, Ken, great job here tonight. And once again, calling for
Merry Christmas
before the break. I should have pulled this out, but we don't say Merry Christmas yet because it's we've got the Thursday show.
Sorry,
so if you want
just in case some people
Christmas,
don't.
If you want a Merry Christmas wish from Kenny and Renny, you better show up on Thursday if you want it, everybody. It'll be great to see you then. Thanks so much for tuning in. Enjoy what's left of your weekend.